Welcome back. We're sitting here with Tanya Evans, a professor at the Penn State Dickinson Law School, Ericon Obote-Togudo, of course, the managing partner and co-founder of Audacity, and Akela Gardner, Bloomberg News reporter. Thanks all of you for being here today. We're trying to have a little broad discussion here about not only the wealth gap in particular, but more importantly, some of the risks, some of the opportunities, some of the initiatives that a new generation of people are taking out there to try to address some of those issues. And maybe, Akela, you can start off. You've actually been reporting on some of these issues, on the percentage of people who are invested in stocks, some of the percentage of people who are invested in crypto assets, and you've seen some pretty interesting disparities between the Black community and the white community. Tell us what you know.
Definitely. So I think it's well known that Black Americans hold less wealth than they probably should in this country. Bloomberg data suggests that that number is about 4% of all wealth that's available, which is trillions of dollars in the U.S. Goes to Black Americans, and that's compared to a population of 13% in the U.S. So obviously a huge disparity there. And in my reporting, I found that Black Americans are actually more likely to hold cryptocurrencies than white Americans. So among investors, 30% of Black Americans, people who already hold some kind of investment, have cryptocurrencies, and that's compared with about 17% of white investors. So there is kind of this consensus that Black Americans are more willing to kind of take the chance or the risk, if you will, in cryptocurrencies. But there's a huge conversation that's happening online and on social media platforms amongst Black Americans who are exchanging information that they've learned, whether through education or themselves on social media, and kind of making an effort to share that with others.
What about the generational differences, Ericon? Specifically, she says that she's seen more people, I guess, investing in this, but is this mainly the younger generation? Are the older folks also getting involved in this as well?
Yeah, so most certainly the younger population is certainly gravitating to it, I would say, the most. And I think that comes from, of course, COVID sort of being the eye-opening moment for a lot of people around the world, but specifically communities of color across the U.S., recognizing that, you know, the bottom fell out in the nation, and everyone realized you kind of have to fend for yourself. And so given that the United States is going to be a majority young and people of color in just a few years, that is the fastest growing demographic to adopt cryptocurrency. I would say, though, that to give more color on this gap and percentage differences between racial groups is that the crypto audience that is really driving the market in the United States today is young white male, probably under 40, that have significantly high disposable incomes, where the wealth transfer is already sort of circulating and incubated within their family infrastructure. And I would say that the younger population of people that are people of color, especially Black youth that are participating in crypto, simply don't have the same volume. So you might find people who are excited about cryptocurrency, but maybe at max, maybe put to work $1,000 or $10,000 versus others that are putting millions.
Yeah. Well, Ericon, can you expand on that just a little bit? Because you've inserted yourself into this world. You've started your own fund here. What's the response been so far?
Yeah, so the response has been resounding from Black investors who want to participate as limited partners, in addition, all the way up to institutions like, you know, your large banks of the world that are interested in participating. I think what's most important is that people seek beyond lip service and the diversity performance of this opportunity, and really know that this is beyond the racial dynamic. This is recognizing where the future of innovation that's going to change the planet will come from, and that's undeniably coming from communities of color that have a vengeance to change the world in their best interest.
And Tanya, you've been beating this drum for a while as well. You've been involved, of course, with MakerDAO and some of their growth initiatives. Maybe you can tell us a little bit just about what you've seen with regards to the responsiveness of people in the Black community to embrace this.
I'm really excited about the response. It's been, in some sense, it's been a mixed bag, because in the Black and brown community, so many times people have been misled, misinformed. I can think in my grandmother's generation, going to sleep one day and the savings and loans on the corner the next day is no longer open and people are losing so much. So there's a real mind shift that's also related to trust and reimagining what trust looks like in a decentralized world. But that presents a lot of really, really important opportunities, particularly for those communities like Black and brown communities that have traditionally been locked out of tech and finance. And we see the intersection of the two in the crypto asset and blockchain space. And so people are starting to lean in to see the reality, or at least the possibilities of what can be when one invests in crypto assets, and certainly in the DeFi space.
Well, Tanya, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about DeFi. There seems to be a certain degree of freedom associated with that world, a certain degree of access. Can you just kind of define for our audience kind of what DeFi, decentralized finance, actually means to you?
Decentralized finance is a bit different than just purchasing Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other coins. Decentralized finance is reimagining what it looks like to participate in savings and loans. So, the banking system effectively is encouraging folks to save, and those savings are then used by banking institutions to give loans on the other side of that. In the decentralized world, it's removing banking institutions and really leveraging peer-to-peer technology and automated protocols to directly connect both sides of that transaction in a way that has the potential to earn more interest and also to participate meaningfully in a loan environment that is so often fraught with systemic issues that, again, keep people from participating meaningfully in the banking system and also in eventually owning property as well.
Ericon, can you expand on that, and particularly on how people can be invested in this other than just, say, buying a crypto coin?
Yeah, so there's a lot to say about the myriad of ways folks can get involved. Right now, what we're seeing is culture and things like art and sports really leading the way in what is adopting a lot of young people, a lot of communities of color, a lot of just general diversity. And that's a really exciting aspect of this world. Some people would argue that NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are a form of DeFi in the sense that there's an asset that in some cases would typically be physical, but is now represented digitally, that shows your ownership of that thing. And where certain assets, call it CryptoPunks, for example, can cost perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. People can actually own a piece of that one asset through something called fractionalized ownership. So really what we're seeing right now through things like NFTs and, of course, more traditional finance that is more crypto-enabled, that is coherent, like a very undeniably DeFi, we're seeing the ability for people to own small parts or large parts of assets that are increasingly becoming more valuable across this new internet. And ultimately, what's the most important thing for people, especially Black communities, is to be a founder or be an investor. Anything else is you doing some form of consumption, which we know has never really acted in our interest despite our $1.3 trillion purchasing power. So my encouragement for all audiences here is to get in your coding bag, get in your community building spirit, and this is now is the opportunity to mobilize your community, your friends, and create an economy around and now is the time to say, I really wish this thing existed in the world. How could crypto or blockchain enable that? And I'm going to go raise funds, approach Audacity to get an initial check to build out this dream, because this is the time for Black people to be builders.
Either an investor or a founder. Kayla, you talk to a lot of young people who seem to also have that same mindset. What are they telling you?
Definitely. And some of the points that both Tanya and Ericon brought up were definitely the resounding response that I got from a lot of the people I spoke to, which is the aspects of crypto that are decentralized and really without mediators are very attractive to people because they've come not to trust the traditional financial system, and they see this as a form of freedom or liberation. And also talking about NFTs, I think a lot of Black Americans are aware that they contribute a lot to music and culture and different things that become very popular in the mainstream. And this is a way to kind of profit off of that and get credit for whether it's crypto dances or a song that goes viral without losing ownership when it continues to get shared and replicated online.
And we've seen this, of course, a lot with the people who are effectively creating this, whether it's with NFTs, of course, the success that we've seen with Top Shot and a lot of athletes and entertainers sort of reclaiming their image to a certain degree here. Does that, I guess, make the investor at the other side of the equation more interested in this? Is it encouraging?
I'll jump in here and say, I think investors should really think to themselves, what is this investment today and what will it be in a year, 5 or 10 years? If you have conviction that it'll be 3x or 10x your investment, then it's worthwhile to participate. But ultimately, I think that Black people, given those assets that you just mentioned, should think about themselves as launching NFTs, creating NFTs, such that people are buying into their creativity, their culture making, their influence, and others on the other side are having to decide on the long-term value of that person. But we know that Black communities have been the market makers for literally 400 plus years, and we've contributed to every global supply chain that the world stands on, particularly technology. So it's our time to really tokenize our creativity and our culture and put it out into the market for others to participate in our shared ownership, but recognizing ultimately that we have to bet on ourselves and our value.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the technology underpinning this, Tanya. You are involved with, of course, with MakerDAO, a decentralized organization. It's more than just investing. I mean, there's a way to lend. There's a certain accountability that participants have amongst themselves on these platforms. Can you kind of explain the underpinnings of that, how that works?
Well, first, even just at a high level, to talk about what the benefits are in the environment, you're coming down to 2 essential qualities that are absent in many respects in traditional finance, and that's access and transparency. And so access, we've spoken about a bit, but being able to participate regardless of your gender, your ethnicity, your race, to participate meaningfully in the system, but also the transparency of distributed ledger technology, meaning it's very jargony, but breaking down to the essence of what is the state of transactions and balances at any given time, and how do you verify the accuracy of that at any moment in time. And the absence of centralized power around who gets to decide what hits the ledger and what does not, in this decentralized way where it's a network of computers instead of one database that manages that information. And so that aspect of blockchain technology is very, very important. And we see it play itself out with a range of crypto assets, not just those that function as currencies, fungible currencies that are interchangeable, but as Erican said, about non-fungible tokens, those that are unique. And a final point is the way that all crypto assets currently in the United States are taxed. They're taxed as property, which means you enjoy the upside of capital gains. You also absorb losses, but that functions differently than currencies. And so it's the added benefit of participating in digital ownership in this new internet that also was very difficult to do in a Web 2.0 world where things were easily replicated and shared without exhausting the original. So there are a number of benefits from the technology that empower artists of color. And I'm glad that you also mentioned investors and collectors on the other side. There's empowerment on both sides to participate in finance and in art.
How do we, I mean, when you think about the traditional finance system, the traditional banking system, we know a lot about some of the structural issues that have effectively either blocked Black people from participating or at least limited their ability to participate in full here. How do we make sure that DeFi, crypto, blockchain, everything associated with this space here doesn't fall victim to some of the same issues that plague our traditional finance system?
I can start with that. I think a lot of Black creators are not waiting on institutional investors to get behind their projects. And I think that's what's so interesting about this space is it's really community oriented. When you create a blockchain project or you create a DAO, which I'm sure Tanya can speak more about, you really are building it with people you trust or you know. And so they're really using the power of community to create these projects, and they're not really waiting for institutional investors or big banks to get behind them.
I think that's very accurate. This is the empowering component of being able to participate on your own terms and in your own time, and not on the sidelines for someone to give you permission to participate. The permissionless environment of decentralized finance, and Erica, and I believe, raised the issue as well of, yes, being on the investor side or the creative side, but on the other side, the other aspect of that is participating in the build of this infrastructure. The layer one technology of blockchain frameworks and things that are built on top of it. Akela mentioned the idea of decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, or decentralized applications. So I love the way Erica mentioned earlier, digging into your coding bag in order to empower yourselves on the technological build of it as well, because there is power in entrepreneurship coupled with this technology that will really start to eradicate the wealth gap that currently exists, that's built on the backs of high income at the expense of appreciating assets. We want to shift the mindset from focusing just on income. Income is important, or just on education. Clearly, as a professor, education is important, but meaningful ownership and participation will be in creating and owning appreciating assets, including businesses.
Yeah, I would definitely add on to that to say that one skill, two skills, three skills that I think are super important for all Black people mobilizing into crypto right now is to become very technically literate as much as you can, and use your own natural creativity as you consume and learn this technology to reinvent and create new things that are outside of the bounds that technology is seeing today, because ultimately that's really where the astronomical wealth creation will be. Otherwise, anything else, you're getting a tail end or a piece of the final product that you think you're buying or owning, but you're not owning the core foundation. And now it's still early to own the foundation and infrastructure of the internet, and that's where most Black people will literally catch up in terms of wealth gaps. Second is, to Tanya's expertise, we must become more legally savvy. And we must be very thoughtful about how we negotiate our community and partnerships and smart contracts and opportunities that secure our asset ownership into perpetuity. That part's really crucial that a lot of people overlook. And the third is, we must become a community of doubles. That means a community that says, if I'm going to buy $5 of Bitcoin, I want to do everything I can to make it 10, to make it 20, to make it 40, to make it 80. We're only going to grow our wealth not by just having an income and holding assets, but getting in the game of growing our money. And there are various ways that are a lot more complex than what we've discussed today that can help folks generate 5 times their money, 10 times their money, in some cases 100 times their money. Black people have to get into that game despite all of the centuries that we've been excluded from it, because from building it to writing the language and the contract to ensure is that we own it for centuries in the future, and from tripling it and 10xing it, that's how we're going to literally transform our futures forever.